It's easy to keep moving. You wake up, you go to work, you answer messages, you smile when people ask how you're doing, you handle your responsibilities, pay your bills, meet your deadlines. From the outside, everything looks fine. Life continues. But beneath the surface, something remains untouched, something unresolved, something that still hurts. The truth is, many of us have become experts at surviving while secretly falling apart. We kept going. But we never really healed. We learned how to function without addressing the wound. We learned how to stay busy enough to avoid our pain. We learned how to move forward physically while remaining stuck emotionally. And after a while, we started confusing movement with healing. But they are not the same thing. Just because you're moving doesn't mean you're recovering. Just because you're smiling doesn't mean you're healed. Just because years have passed doesn't mean the wound disappeared. Sometimes time passes, but pain stays. Sometimes life moves on, but the heart remains frozen in a moment it never processed. The breakup happened years ago. The betrayal happened years ago. The loss happened years ago. Yet somehow those experiences still shape how we trust, how we love, how we see ourselves, and how we move through the world. Not because we're weak, but because healing requires more than time. It requires attention, it requires honesty, it requires courage. And many of us never had the chance to stop long enough to heal. We were too busy surviving. Life didn't pause after our heartbreak. Responsibilities didn't disappear after our loss. The world didn't stop spinning because we were hurting. So we did what we thought we had to do. We kept going. We pushed through. We carried the pain quietly. We told ourselves we'd deal with it later. But later became months. Months became years. And suddenly we found ourselves carrying emotional wounds that had quietly become part of who we are. The saddest part? Many people don't even realize they're still wounded. They simply adapt. They become guarded, distant, suspicious, emotionally unavailable. They stop expecting too much. They stop trusting easily. They stop believing they deserve good things. And because these changes happen so gradually, they begin to feel normal. But normal doesn't always mean healthy. Sometimes what feels normal is actually unhealed pain wearing a familiar face. The person who struggles to trust may not have a trust problem. They may have a healing problem. The person who pushes everyone away may not be cold. They may be protecting a wound. The person who constantly seeks validation may not be needy. They may be carrying years of unaddressed rejection. Pain that isn't healed doesn't disappear. It transforms. It leaks into conversations, into relationships, into decisions, into self-worth. And eventually, it begins shaping a life that revolves around protection rather than growth. That's what unhealed wounds do. They convince us that safety is more important than living. So we build walls. We create distance. We avoid vulnerability. We avoid risk. We avoid anything that might hurt us again. And while those walls may protect us from pain, they also block joy. They block connection. They block love. They block healing itself. Because healing doesn't happen through avoidance. Healing happens through engagement. It happens when we finally stop running from our pain and start listening to it. That can be terrifying. Most people would rather stay busy than sit quietly with their wounds, because silence has a way of revealing things we've been avoiding. It forces us to face memories, to face disappointments, to face grief. Not just grief from death, but grief from every version of life we hoped would happen and didn't. The career we never got, the relationship we lost, the dreams that didn't unfold, the versions of ourselves we had to let go. Sometimes healing begins when we finally allow ourselves to grieve honestly, not to become trapped in sadness, but to acknowledge what we've been carrying. Because what we refuse to acknowledge continues to control us. Many people spend years trying to outrun their pain, yet the healing they're looking for is waiting in the very place they're afraid to look. Inside the wound, inside the memory, inside the truth. The truth that says, yes, it hurt. Yes, it changed me. Yes, I struggled. Yes, I was broken. And perhaps most importantly, yes, I deserve to heal. Because healing is not something reserved for a lucky few. It's not something you earn through perfection. It belongs to anyone willing to face themselves honestly. And healing doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes healing is simply admitting you're not okay. Sometimes it's asking for help, setting a boundary, resting, forgiving yourself, allowing tears you've held back for years. The world celebrates resilience, and resilience is beautiful. But resilience without healing can become exhaustion. You can be strong for too long. You can carry too much for too long. You can survive for so long that you forget how to live. There's a difference between surviving and living. Survival says, just make it through today. Living says, let's experience this fully. Survival was necessary, but it was never meant to become a permanent way of life. At some point, we have to move beyond surviving. We have to give ourselves permission to heal. Not because healing erases the past, but because it changes our relationship with it. The scars remain. The memories remain. The lessons remain. But the power those experiences hold over us begins to fade. The wound no longer controls every decision. The pain no longer defines every relationship. The past no longer dictates the future. That's the beauty of healing. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without being destroyed, carrying the lesson without carrying the weight, honoring the experience without being imprisoned by it. The strongest people are not those who never break. The strongest people are those who allow themselves to heal after they break. Because healing takes vulnerability. It takes humility. It takes patience. And patience may be the hardest part. We want quick results, immediate relief, instant transformation. But healing rarely works that way. Healing is often slow. It happens in small moments, in quiet realizations, in healthier choices, in conversations that bring understanding, in boundaries that protect peace, in tiny acts of self-respect, repeated over time. One day you notice the memory doesn't hurt quite as much. One day you realize you're reacting differently. One day you recognize that you've become gentler with yourself. One day you look up and realize you're no longer carrying the same weight. Not because life became easier, but because healing happened. Little by little, moment by moment, choice by choice. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you've spent years pushing forward. Maybe you've mastered the art of appearing okay. Maybe you've convinced everyone around you that you've moved on. But deep down, you know there are still places within you that need attention. Still wounds that need compassion. Still pain that deserves to be acknowledged. If that's you, this is your reminder. You don't have to keep carrying everything alone. You don't have to pretend you're fine. You don't have to earn the right to heal. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to recover because healing isn't weakness. Healing is courage. It takes courage to face what hurt you. It takes courage to believe your future can be different from your past. And it takes courage to stop measuring your worth by how much pain you can endure. You don't have to prove your strength by suffering silently. True strength includes knowing when it's time to heal. The goal isn't to become someone who was never hurt. The goal is to become someone who was hurt and chose healing anyway. Someone who refused to let pain have the final word. Someone who transformed wounds into wisdom. Someone who discovered that life is more than merely getting through the day. Because there is still joy ahead. There is still peace ahead. There is still purpose ahead. And you deserve to experience those things fully. Not as someone constantly running from the past, but as someone who has made peace with it. So today, ask yourself honestly, have I truly healed or have I simply kept going? That answer may change everything. Because movement alone is not healing. Busyness is not healing. Time alone is not healing. Healing begins the moment you stop pretending the wound isn't there. Healing begins the moment you choose honesty over avoidance. Healing begins the moment you believe that your pain matters and your recovery matters too. We kept going. Many of us had to. But now it's time for something more. It's time to heal. Not perfectly, not overnight, not all at once, but one brave step at a time. And that step may be the beginning of the life you've been longing for all along.